Welcome back to our channel. Today, we have an incredible and heartwarming story to share with you. It's a tale of love, faithfulness, and ultimate redemption that will leave you both inspired and in awe. Meet Akosua, a devoted wife who, after a simple traditional marriage in Africa, finds herself in a challenging and emotional journey as she waits for her husband and son who never return. What follows is a story of hardship, rejection, and a surprising twist that will tug at your heartstrings and make you rethink the meaning of loyalty and resilience. In today's video, we'll dive deep into Akosua's journey from being a revered figure in her community to being dubbed Black Widow, and how her life takes a dramatic turn when her son, who had become a billionaire, comes back into her life. This story is not just about struggle, it's about the transformative power of love and the extraordinary surprises life can bring. If you're moved by powerful stories and want to see more inspiring content like this, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. If you enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up and share it with your friends to spread this incredible story. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below and let us know what you think about Akosua's amazing journey. Get ready for a rollercoaster of emotions and let's dive right into this extraordinary tale. Thanks for watching, and let's get started. In a small, serene village nestled amidst the lush green hills of Ghana, lived a young lady named Akosua. She was known for her beauty, grace, and kindness, which shone through in everything she did. Akosua's life was simple but filled with the warmth of family and friends who cherished her dearly. She lived with her parents in a modest, thatched roof house surrounded by a garden where she spent her mornings tending to the flowers and vegetables. One day, during a festive celebration in the village, Akosua met Kwame, a young man who had recently returned from the city. He was tall, with a strong build, and carried himself with a quiet confidence that immediately caught Akosua's attention. Kwame, too, noticed Akosua and was drawn to her gentle spirit and radiant smile. Over time, they began to spend more time together, sharing stories of their lives and dreams for the future. Kwame was different from the other young men in the village. He was ambitious, always speaking of the opportunities that awaited those willing to work hard and take risks. Despite his ambitions, he remained deeply rooted in his culture and traditions, something that resonated deeply with Akosua. They shared a love for their heritage, and it wasn't long before they decided to get married. Their wedding was a simple but beautiful traditional Ghanaian ceremony, filled with vibrant colors, music, and dance. Akosua wore a stunning Kent cloth, woven with intricate patterns and adorned with gold jewelry passed down through generations. Kwame was dressed in a matching Kent, and together they looked like a royal couple. The whole village came out to celebrate their union, and the air was filled with joy and blessings from elders who saw in them a bright future. After their marriage, Akosua and Kwame moved into a small house at the edge of the village. Life was good, they were happy, and soon they were blessed with a baby boy whom they named Kofi. The arrival of Kofi brought even more joy into their lives. Akosua loved being a mother, and she spent her days caring for Kofi, teaching him the ways of their culture, and singing him lullabies that had been sung to her when she was a child. Kwame, on the other hand, continued to work hard, always striving to provide the best for his family. He would often talk to Akosua about his dreams of giving Kofi a better life, one where he could grow up with opportunities beyond what the village could offer. Akosua, though content with their simple life, supported Kwame's ambitions and trusted in his vision for their future. As the years passed, their love for each other grew stronger. They faced challenges together, but their bond only deepened with each trial. Akosua felt blessed to have found a partner in Kwame, someone who shared her values and who was as committed to their family as she was. However, life, as it often does, began to throw curveballs. Kwame, restless and eager to make something more of himself, began to talk more frequently about the possibility of leaving the village to seek better opportunities abroad. He had heard stories from friends who had left and found success in foreign lands, and he believed that he, too, could find a way to create a better life for his family if only he could get the right opportunity. Akosua was hesitant. The thought of Kwame leaving filled her with a deep sense of dread. She couldn't imagine life without him by her side, and the idea of him taking Kofi along only made her fear grow. Yet, she knew that Kwame's intentions were pure. He wanted to provide for his family, to give Kofi a future that he could be proud of. After many long conversations, where they weighed the pros and cons, Akosua finally agreed to let Kwame pursue his dreams. It was decided that Kwame would travel to the United States, where he had a distant cousin who had promised to help him get settled and find work. Kofi, now 5 years old, would go with him to ensure he could access the education and opportunities that Kwame believed were crucial for his future. On the day of their departure, the village gathered once more, but this time the mood was somber. Akosua, trying to stay strong, held Kofi tightly, not wanting to let him go. Kwame reassured her, promising that he would return soon and that they would all be together again. He kissed her gently on the forehead, holding back tears as he said goodbye. As they left, Akosua stood at the edge of the village, watching them disappear into the distance, her heart heavy with a mixture of hope and fear. She prayed for their safe journey and for Kwame's success. She trusted him and believed that his decision was for the best. But deep inside, a small voice whispered doubts, fears that she tried to push aside as she walked back to their now empty home. The days that followed were difficult for Akosua. The house felt emptier than ever, and the silence was deafening. She missed the sound of Kofi's laughter, the warmth of Kwame's presence. She spent her days in the garden, tending to the plants, finding solace in the simple tasks that kept her hands busy and her mind occupied. Letters from Kwame arrived sporadically, each one filled with news of his struggles and small victories as he tried to establish himself in a new land. He spoke of the challenges of being in a foreign country, where everything was different, but he remained optimistic, always ending his letters with a promise that he would return soon. But as the weeks turned into months, the letters became less frequent. Akosua's heart grew heavier with each passing day, the silence between them becoming unbearable. She clung to the hope that Kwame and Kofi would return, that they would be a family again. But as time went on, that hope began to fade, replaced by a growing fear that something had gone terribly wrong. In the quiet of her now lonely home, Akosua could only pray and wait, her heart aching for the family she had lost. The first few months after Kwame and Kofi left were the hardest for Akosua. She tried to keep herself busy, taking on more responsibilities within the village, but nothing could fill the void left by their absence. Every day, she would go to the village square, hoping for news, a letter, or even a traveler who might have seen or heard something about them. But each day, she returned home with nothing but the sound of the wind and the rustling leaves to keep her company. As the months turned into years, Akosua's once vibrant spirit began to wane. The community, which had once rallied around her in support, started to grow distant. Some whispered that Kwame had abandoned her, that he had found a new life in America and had no intention of returning. Others suggested that Kofi had been taken away, that she would never see her son again. These rumors hurt Akosua deeply, but she refused to believe them. She held on to the love she had for Kwame and the hope that he would keep his promise. The village elders, who had initially been sympathetic, began to pressure Akosua to move on with her life. They introduced her to other men, suitors who were interested in marrying her, but Akosua refused them all. Her heart belonged to Kwame, and she could not imagine being with anyone else. This decision, however, did not sit well with her family. Akosua's family, especially her mother, became increasingly frustrated with her. They could not understand why she would cling to a man who had clearly left her behind. They believed that by refusing to remarry, Akosua was bringing shame upon them. The arguments grew more frequent, with her mother often reminding her of her duty to the family and the village. "You are a beautiful woman, Akosua," her mother would say. You deserve a man who is here, who can take care of you. Kwame is gone, and he is not coming back. You need to think about your future, about the family's future. But Akosua would simply shake her head, tears brimming in her eyes. I made a vow, Mama, she would reply softly. I promise to be faithful to Kwame, and I will wait for him, no matter how long it takes. This stubborn loyalty only served to isolate Akosua further. Her once loving family began to distance themselves from her, ashamed of what they saw as her foolishness. The villagers, too, began to avoid her, no longer inviting her to gatherings or celebrations. She became a ghost in her own village, her presence barely acknowledged by those around her. Despite the growing loneliness, Akosua remained steadfast. She continued to tend to her garden, now a place of solace where she could pour her heart into the earth, nurturing the plants as she waited for the day Kwame and Kofi would return. She often imagined what it would be like when they did, picturing the moment she would see them again, the tears of joy she would shed as she held them both in her arms. But as the years dragged on, Akosua's hope began to waver. The once bright dreams of a happy reunion started to dim, replaced by a gnawing fear that perhaps the whispers were true, that Kwame had indeed moved on without her. She tried to push these thoughts away, to cling to the love that had once brought her so much joy, but it was becoming increasingly difficult. Her health began to suffer as well. The stress of waiting, of living in a constant state of uncertainty, took its toll on her body. As the years passed, Akosua's physical and emotional strength waned. Her once glowing skin became sallow, and the brightness in her eyes dulled. She had aged beyond her years, a testament to the weight of her unwavering faithfulness. The villagers, once filled with admiration for her loyalty, began to pity her. They whispered behind her back, calling her the Black Widow, a woman abandoned and forgotten, clinging to the ghost of a love that had long since faded away. Akosua's family grew increasingly frustrated with her decision to remain faithful to Kwame. Her mother, now an elderly woman herself, no longer tried to hide her disappointment. The arguments between them became rare, not because the tension had lessened, but because Akosua had simply grown too weary to fight back. "Akosua, why do you persist in this foolishness?" her mother would say, her voice tinged with both anger and sorrow. "You have wasted your youth waiting for a man who is never coming back. Look at yourself. What do you have to show for all these years of waiting? Nothing but pain and loneliness." Akosua would listen in silence, her head bowed, unable to argue with the truth of her mother's words. Deep down, she knew that her mother was right, that the years had taken their toll and that her life had become a shadow of what it once was. But despite the growing doubt in her heart, she could not let go of the hope that one day, Kwame and Kofi would return. The rejection and loneliness became a constant presence in her life. She had once been a respected and cherished member of the community, but now she was seen as an outcast, someone to be pitied but not helped. The villagers avoided her, afraid that her misfortune might somehow be contagious. The children, who once greeted her with smiles and laughter, now ran away when they saw her coming, whispering tales of the Black Widow, who was cursed to live out her days alone. Despite the isolation, Akosua continued to hold on to the love she had for her husband and son. She would often sit by the small stream near her home, the place where she and Kwame had shared their first kiss. She would close her eyes and listen to the sound of the water flowing over the rocks, letting it take her back to a time when her life was full of joy and hope. But as the years dragged on, Akosua's hope grew weaker. The letters from Kwame, which had once been her lifeline, had long since stopped coming. She had no way of knowing what had happened to him or Kofi, no way of finding out if they were even still alive. The uncertainty gnawed at her, slowly eroding the last remnants of her strength. One cold, rainy evening, as Akosua sat by the fire in her small, dilapidated home, she found herself overcome with despair. The loneliness, the rejection, the endless waiting, it was all too much to bear. She wept, her tears falling into the fire and sizzling away into nothingness, much like the life she had once dreamed of. "Kwame, where are you?" she whispered into the darkness, her voice barely audible. "Why did you leave me? Why did you take our son away?" For the first time in years, Akosua allowed herself to entertain the possibility that Kwame was never coming back. The thought was like a knife to her heart, sharp and painful, but she could not escape it. Perhaps he had found a new life, a new family, in the land of opportunity. Perhaps he had forgotten all about the promises he had made, about the woman he had left behind. But even as these thoughts swirled in her mind, a small voice inside her pushed back against the despair. It reminded her of the love she and Kwame had shared, of the dreams they had for their future. It reminded her of the vows they had made, of the promises they had kept for so many years. And it reminded her of Kofi, their precious son, who had been taken from her too soon. No matter how much pain and suffering she endured, Akosua could not let go of the love she had for her family. It was the only thing that had sustained her through all these years, the only thing that had kept her going when everything else had fallen apart. As she lay down to sleep that night, the fire dying out beside her, Akosua made a decision. She would continue to wait, to hold on to the hope that Kwame and Kofi would return. She knew that the chances were slim, that she might spend the rest of her life waiting in vain, but she could not do otherwise. Her love for them was too strong, too deep to simply let go. The next morning, as the sun rose over the hills, Akosua stepped out of her home and into the garden. The rain from the night before had left the earth soft and fertile, perfect for planting new seeds. She knelt down in the soil and began to walk, her hands moving with a renewed sense of purpose. She would plant new life, tend to it, and watch it grow. It was the only way she knew how to keep going, to keep the hope alive in her heart. And as she walked, she whispered a prayer for Kwame and Kofi, wherever they might be, that they would one day find their way back to her. Years had passed since Kwame and Kofi left, and Akosua had grown old. Her once vibrant beauty had faded, replaced by the lines of age and the weariness of a life lived in waiting. Her garden, however, remained lush and full of life, a testament to the love and care she had poured into it over the years. One day, as Akosua was tending to her plants, she noticed a commotion in the village. People were running toward the main road, shouting excitedly and pointing at something in the distance. Curiosity piqued, Akosua set down her tools and followed the crowd, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and fear. As she reached the edge of the village, she saw a group of men and women standing around a large, sleek car that had just arrived. The car was unlike anything Akosua had ever seen, shiny, black, and impossibly grand. The villagers were buzzing with excitement, wondering who the stranger might be and what business they had in their humble village. Akosua stood at a distance, her heart in her throat. She watched as the car door opened, and a tall, well-dressed man stepped out. He was handsome, with a strong build and a commanding presence that immediately drew everyone's attention. But what struck Akosua the most was his face. There was something familiar about it, something that tugged at her memory. The man looked around, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Akosua. For a moment, he stood still, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he began to walk toward her, his steps deliberate and filled with purpose. As he approached, the villagers parted, creating a path between him and Akosua. She stood frozen, her mind racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. And then, as the man drew closer, she saw it, the eyes, the nose, the way he carried himself. It was Kofi, her son. "Mother." Kofi's voice was soft, almost hesitant, as if he could hardly believe what he was seeing. "Mother, is it really you?" Akosua's legs gave way, and she fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Kofi," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "My son, my precious son." Kofi rushed to her side, wrapping his arms around her frail body and holding her close. "I'm here, Mother," he said, his own voice trembling with emotion. "I'm here now. I've come back for you." The villagers watched in stunned silence, unable to believe what they were seeing. The Black Widow, the woman who had been abandoned and forgotten, had been found by her son, who had returned as a wealthy and powerful man. As Kofi held his mother, he whispered words of apology, telling her how much he had missed her, how much he had searched for her. He told her of the years he had spent in America, of the struggles and triumphs he had faced, and how he had never stopped thinking of her. "I promised myself that I would find you, no matter how long it took," Kofi said, his voice filled with determination. "And now that I have, I will never leave you again." Akosua listened, her heart swelling with love and pride for the son she had raised. She could hardly believe that the boy she had sent away all those years ago had grown into such a strong and capable man. And yet, as she looked into his eyes, she saw the same love and devotion that had always been there, the same bond that had kept her going through all the years of waiting. Kofi helped his mother to her feet, and together they walked back to the village, the crowd parting to let them through. As they passed, the villagers bowed their heads in respect, murmuring words of amazement and wonder. The Black Widow was no more. In her place stood a woman who had endured unimaginable suffering but had never lost hope. When they reached Akosua's home, Kofi paused, looking at the small, run-down house where his mother had lived for so many years. His heart ached at the sight, knowing how much she had sacrificed, how much she had suffered while waiting for him. "Mother, you will never live like this again," Kofi said, his voice firm. "I have built a mansion for you, a place where you can live in comfort and peace for the rest of your days. You deserve nothing less." Akosua's eyes filled with tears once more, but this time they were tears of joy. She had waited so long, endured so much, and now, finally, her prayers had been answered. Her son had returned, and he was everything she had ever hoped he would be. Kofi took his mother to the mansion he had built, a grand house on the outskirts of the village. It was a place of beauty and luxury, with spacious rooms, fine furniture, and a garden even more magnificent than the one she had tended for all those years. As Akosua walked through the house, she marveled at the life that Kofi had created, the life that he now wanted to share with her. She felt overwhelmed by the love and generosity he had shown, by the knowledge that all her years of waiting had not been in vain. In the days that followed, word of Akosua's incredible story spread throughout the village and beyond. People came from far and wide to see the woman who had been so faithful, so patient, and who had finally been rewarded with the return of her son. They no longer called her the Black Widow, instead, they called her the mother of a billionaire. On her birthday, Kofi threw a grand celebration in her honor, inviting the entire village to join in the festivities. The party was unlike anything the villagers had ever seen, with music, dancing, and food in abundance. Akosua, dressed in the finest clothes and surrounded by her loved ones, looked out at the crowd with a heart full of gratitude. As the night wore on, Kofi stood before the gathered guests, his arm wrapped protectively around his mother's shoulders. He spoke of her strength, her faithfulness, and her unwavering love, and how it had inspired him to achieve everything he had. "My mother is the reason I am standing here today," Kofi said, his voice filled with emotion. "She taught me the value of love, of family, and of never giving up. Everything I have, everything I am, I owe to her." The crowd erupted in applause, their admiration for Akosua clear. She had gone from being an outcast, a woman scorned and pitied, to a figure of respect and reverence. Her story had touched their hearts, and they knew that they would never forget the lessons she had taught them. As the party continued, Akosua looked around at the faces of those who had once shunned her, now filled with admiration and respect. She felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that she had done the right thing, that her faithfulness had not been in vain. And as she looked at her son, the man he had become, she knew that all the years of waiting, all the pain and suffering, had been worth it. She had never given up on her family, and now, at long last, her family had come back to her. The night sky was filled with stars, shining brightly over the village. As Akosua stood beside her son, surrounded by the love and joy of the people she had once known so well, she felt a sense of fulfillment that she had never known before. She had waited a lifetime for this moment, and now that it had come, she knew that she was truly blessed. In the years that followed, Akosua lived a life of peace and comfort, surrounded by her family and the love of the community. The mansion that Kofi had built for her became a place of gathering, where people from all walks of life came to seek her wisdom and guidance. She had become a living legend, a symbol of faithfulness and the enduring power of love. Kofi, who had built a successful business empire in America, made it a point to return to Ghana frequently, spending as much time as possible with his mother. He never forgot the lessons she had taught him, and he carried her wisdom with him in everything he did. Under his leadership, the family business flourished, and he used his wealth to give back to the community that had once scorned his mother. He established schools, clinics, and community centers, providing opportunities for the children of the village to learn and grow. He funded scholarships for students who showed promise, ensuring that they could pursue their dreams without the obstacles of poverty standing in their way. The village, once small and struggling, began to thrive, and the people who lived there knew that they had Akosua and Kofi to thank. As the years passed, Akosua's health began to decline. She had lived a long and full life, but the years of hardship had taken their toll on her body. Despite this, she remained strong in spirit, always smiling and offering words of encouragement to those who visited her. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, casting a golden glow over the mansion, Akosua called Kofi to her side. She was lying in her bed, her body frail but her eyes still bright with love and pride. "Kofi, my son," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want you to know how proud I am of you. You have become everything I ever hoped you would be, and more." Kofi took her hand in his heart heavy with emotion. "Mother, I am who I am because of you," he replied, his voice thick with tears. "You taught me what it means to love, to be strong, and to never give up. I will carry your lessons with me for the rest of my life." Akosua smiled, her eyes shining with tears of her own. "You have made me so happy, Kofi," she said. "But there is one more thing I must ask of you." "Anything, mother," Kofi said, his voice filled with determination. "Whatever you need, I will do it." Akosua looked into her son's eyes, her expression serious. "Promise me that you will continue to take care of this village, that you will ensure that the people here have the opportunities they need to build better lives for themselves and their children. I want you to keep the legacy of love and faithfulness alive, so that future generations will remember what we have built together." Kofi nodded, his grip on her hand tightening. "I promise, mother," he said, his voice firm. "I will do everything in my power to honor your wishes. I will make sure that your legacy lives on, and that the love you have shown will continue to touch the lives of others for years to come." Akosua's smile widened, a look of contentment settling over her face. "Thank you, my son," she said. "You have made me so proud. I can leave this world in peace, knowing that you will carry on what we have started." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a final golden light over the village, Akosua closed her eyes, her hand still clasped in Kofi's. She took a deep breath, and with a sense of fulfillment and peace, she passed away, surrounded by the love of her family. The news of Akosua's passing spread quickly through the village and beyond. People came from far and wide to pay their respects to the woman who had become a symbol of love, faithfulness, and strength. The funeral was a grand affair, attended by dignitaries, villagers, and all those whose lives had been touched by Akosua and her son. Kofi, though grief-stricken by the loss of his mother, took comfort in knowing that she had lived a life filled with love and that she had found peace in the end. He honored her memory by continuing the work they had started together, ensuring that the village and its people would never forget the lessons she had taught. The mansion became a place of learning and reflection, where people could come to study, to grow, and to remember the woman who had waited so long for the return of her family. The village continued to thrive, and the children who grew up there knew that they were part of a legacy of love that would endure for generations to come. And so, the story of Akosua, the black widow who became the mother of a billionaire, lived on. It was a story of love and sacrifice, of faithfulness and strength, and it served as a reminder to all who heard it that no matter how difficult the journey, love would always find a way. As the years passed, and Kofi grew old himself, he would often sit by the stream where his parents had once shared their first kiss. He would close his eyes and listen to the sound of the water, letting it take him back to a time when life was simple, and the love of his mother had been the guiding light of his life. And in those moments, he would smile, knowing that Akosua's legacy would never be forgotten. The love she had shown, the strength she had embodied, would continue to inspire and guide the lives of those who came after her. It was a legacy that would endure, just as her love had endured through all the years of waiting, and it would continue to shine brightly, a beacon of hope and faith for all who heard her story. Thank you for watching, but don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, share and turn on the notification button for more interesting stories like this.